Now, of course, if and when Greer is confirmed, his decisions in the trade portfolio will have an impact on our country. And to talk about this, we're now joined by Jonathan Wilkinson, the Minister for Energy and Natural Resources. Minister, thank you for taking the time.
Not at all. Thank you for having me.
So listen, let's start with Mr. Greer here, the former Chief of Staff to Robert Lighthizer. His messaging so far has been about U.S. domestic supply. He talks about tariffs. He talks about getting access to dairy markets, including here in Canada. What type of challenge do you think he will present to Canada as we look towards renegotiating deals like CUSMA?
Well, look, I mean, he is somebody who understands the trade issues between Canada and the United States very well. We obviously know Mr. Lighthizer very well from the last renegotiation of the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. I would expect no less than the United States to actually be articulating strongly their positions and their thoughts about areas that they would like to discuss in the context of the review of CUSMA. We obviously will have our own views about things that we would like to see changed at the point at which we actually do engage that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, he was also asked about tariffs on Canada. He talked about fentanyl. And you're in Montreal right now, but you just got back from Washington, D.C., where you spent the last couple of days. I'm wondering, from the people you spoke with and those who are supportive of these tariffs proposed by Donald Trump, what were they telling you? Is there one main irritant that they keep raising time and again?
Well, I would start by telling you I haven't been able to find many people in the United States who think tariffs on Canada are a good idea. And that goes for, Republican senators, Republican congresspeople. It goes for American business, a whole range of different organizations. But I would say that certainly where this started was a conversation around the border. And Canada was very supportive of engaging that conversation. At the end of the day, neither country has an interest in migration up or down around the Canada-U.S. border. None of us have an interest in seeing even a pound of fentanyl go one way or the other across the border. And of course, Canada has had a historic issue with firearms from the United States coming up. So strengthening the border is not something we don't disagree on. I think they have pointed to issues around the trade deficit. I think that's probably one that we need to work our way through. But, let's be clear, Canada actually, or the United States has a major trade surplus with Canada in manufactured goods. The only reason why there is a trade deficit that the Americans have with us is because we provide them energy that they use to power their manufacturing economy. It's good for the United States and it's actually good for Canada. And that's the argument that I've been making in Washington.
Okay, the argument that you've been making, but I'm wondering whether or not you're able to dissuade or rather convince people of the value of that argument. Because if you talk about there's not many people in favor of these tariffs, they are still being threatened by Donald Trump. And it seems the business community, border states, they've been unable to dissuade the U.S. president from using tariffs as a cudgel against Canada.
Well, I guess I would say a couple of things. I mean, first of all, let's remember we're 2 weeks into the new administration. I know it seems like probably 2 years, but we're 2 weeks in. And there are lots of chairs in the White House and everywhere else that are still empty, that they still have to fill. And so even finding the right people, and the American business folks were telling me this, even for them to find the right people is not simple at this stage. So number one, I think people just need to reflect on where we're at in terms of the time. But number two, I would say that the threat of the imposition of tariffs that we saw just a few days ago has actually encouraged a lot of folks to redouble their efforts, and for some to actually do so publicly. So Senator Grassley, for example, a number of governors have come out and said that they actually think this is not a productive conversation and we should be moving in a different direction. American business has been less vocal publicly, although some have, like the American Petroleum Institute. But they are weighing in very actively behind the scenes to try to ensure that the administration hears that this is actually going to cost American consumers a lot of money, and it's going to hurt American businesses. And there are many more productive things that Canada and the U.S. can do with the time that we share and that we spend together to actually help build on the prosperity that we have helped to create across the border already.
Okay, so as you say, redoubling of efforts for people who are essentially on Canada's side on this one. But as it stands, this country faces a 25% tariff on most goods, a 10% tariff on energy. Is your government willing to accept those carve-outs, or will it consider export taxes as a way of hitting the United States?
Well, I mean, look, I used to be a negotiator, and I would tell you that the first rule of negotiation is A, you don't do it in public, and B, you don't take tools out of your toolbox before you're actually in the negotiation. So I would say every option is on the table. We obviously are going to start this process if we are forced to do it. And let me say forced by the imposition of tariffs by the United States. If that happens, we will start with American goods that are actually sold in Canada in large quantities for which Canadians actually have alternatives. And that is to create challenge for the American administration, pressure on them to actually change course. Over the course of this process, if in fact there is more actions that are actually taken, we will have to reflect on that. But we have no interest in escalating this. At the end of the day, we are looking to address the concerns by using facts, but also providing some options in terms of how do we actually create a bridge to a more productive conversation. So in Washington, I was pitching the idea of an energy and minerals alliance that could help them vis-a-vis the dependence in many areas that they have on China and Russia. And I think that is the kind of productive conversation that we want to have.
Okay. You use the word options there, and I'm wondering about the options that are now before Canada, because your government, back in 2016, it said no to the Northern Gateway pipeline. You were once the environment minister. Is it time to reverse that decision and revive not only Northern Gateway, but also perhaps Energy East as a way of looking to diversify markets?
So, look, I mean, in terms of diversification of markets, that is much broader than just oil and gas. Obviously, we are going to need to think about diversification. That involves debottlenecking the railways. It involves thinking about how we expand the capacity at the ports. In the context of oil and gas, with gas, we actually have a number of liquid natural gas facilities that are under construction in British Columbia, and others that actually are getting close to investment decisions. Those will provide a significant outlet for Canada's gas, such that not all of it has to flow to the United States. In the context of oil, this government built the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It wasn't without controversy, although I think most people would say now, given where we're at, that was a very good decision in terms of diversification. And of course, there will need to be a conversation going forward amongst premiers with First Nations about how do we try to reduce vulnerability with respect to dependence that we have with respect to the transportation of oil. I think the biggest vulnerabilities are actually not west; they are east, where for example, Line 5 goes down into the United States and then comes back up into Canada, supplies significant oil to Ontario and Quebec, and in Atlantic Canada, where they are significantly reliant on oil from the United States. I hope that we get through this and this whole threat of tariffs goes into the background and it's less of an urgent conversation. But of course, the Prime Minister and the Premiers are going to need to have some conversations about what Canada can and what Canada should do.
Minister, out of time, but I want you to know I always appreciate the time you do have with us. Thank you for this.
All right. Thanks very much.